Hi, welcome from the Midwest. We're Every Child Matters, a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to making children a top election campaign issue.
We're live online today with prominent children and family leaders, as well as grassroots advocates, for a special forum to lift up kids' issues. The forum is Voting for Kids, a conversation on children's health, childcare, paid leave, and ending child poverty. We're coinciding with this week's Democratic Party National Convention, and we'll hear from key party representatives. Every Child Matters does not endorse or oppose candidates or any party, and we'll have a forum next week during the Republican Party National Convention. We're asking both parties the same questions. How will they make children central to this year's campaign? If elected, how will they address the serious problems that threaten this country's children and future? So to get our program started, I'll turn it over to our great friend, Myra Jones-Taylor from 0 to 3.
Thank you, Jill and Brian, for those kind remarks. It is great to be here, and thank you to Senator Tina Smith and Representative Karen Bass for taking the time to join us later today. And thank you to our friends at Every Child Matters and all the partner organizations who made this event a reality. As we kick off our amazing lineup of speakers to address the many issues affecting children and families today, I want to focus my remarks on the plight of babies and families and how they are struggling through this pandemic across the country. Long before any of us had ever heard of COVID-19, infants, toddlers, and their families in this country were already struggling, especially Black and brown babies. When 0 to 3 released the 2020 State of Babies yearbook earlier this summer, we explored how the state a baby is born in makes a huge difference in their lives. We also confirmed what many have long known, that Black and brown babies start at a major disadvantage no matter where in the United States they're born. Black babies are twice as likely as white babies to die before their first birthday, and Black women's maternal mortality rate is more than 3 times higher than among white women. And Black women have a 55% chance or rate of preterm births, higher than white women. When we come out of the other side of this pandemic, and we will, we as a country have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us to identify disparities and make the potential of every baby a national priority. COVID has exposed the threadbare systems that support our babies and families and has deepened the childcare crisis we're facing today. Historically, national policies have fundamentally ignored the vital role that families play in our economy. The virus has demonstrated that as a nation, we simply stand on the sidelines while families juggle their jobs and babies, and too often feel like they are failing at both while they struggle to make ends meet. As the next administration looks to steer our country out of the pandemic and set us on the path to a full recovery, we are at a crossroads. We can continue along our current path, squandering the potential of an entire generation and jeopardizing our nation's security and future prosperity, or we can invest in what babies and families need to thrive, quickening our recovery while ensuring our next generation of leaders, innovators, and workers can meet their full potential. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven that if families can't work, our economy can't work. National policies on any subject need to keep our families centered, and we must ensure that those policies are implemented equitably. Otherwise, we will end up shortchanging an entire half of our nation's children. Furthermore, if we don't emphasize supporting development as soon as a baby opens their eyes for the first time, we are missing the opportunity to propel rapidly developing brains to their brightest possible future. Whoever takes the presidential oath in January, we must call on him to prioritize building the strong systems babies, children, and families need. That means paid leave and medical leave. That also means that families can take time to bond with their babies and care for their children. And that means comprehensive, affordable, high-quality childcare. That means transform pediatric care that supports early development and family well-being. And that also means an equitable economic base that bolsters family economic security when children are young and their development is most sensitive. If we want to put our country on the right track, it all starts with babies. And 0 to 3 looks forward to working with the next administration to think babies and ensure that the potential of every baby is our national priority. Now I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Shanita Buckner, an amazing advocate who has represented Texas at 0 to 3's Strolling Thunder event.
I'm Shanita Buckner. This is my husband, Jason.
Hello.
This is our rambunctious toddler, Caden. He is 3. And this is our infant son, Cairo, who is 10 months. Jason and I have been married for 5.5 years. We met in college at Texas Tech University. I am the director of project management for a community-based center.
And I'm a sales consultant for an educational content software company.
And we live in Arlington, Texas. Our days start so very early, from as early as sometimes 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and they don't end until the wee hours of the morning. Some nights, really very early in the morning, my husband is up at midnight and 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning trying to complete his task because we weren't able or didn't have the opportunity to do it throughout the day because we are caring for 2 small children. With me being on furlough and also not knowing when I'll return to work, if I'll return to work, what our finances will be, that in itself provides another layer of stress for us because we don't want to lose our slot at the Learning Center. We spent 3 years on a waiting list for Caden just to get into the center. And now that both boys are there, we want to continue for them to go. We love the center. They love the center. But we are really just uncertain of what is going to happen in this next phase 2 of opening Texas and opening the Learning Center.
Thank you, Shanita. And now we welcome our next panelist, Sade Munsami.
Thank you, Myra. Good afternoon to all the families at home and at work, to those of you who raise children, who care for children, and who want a better future for our children. My name is Sade Munsami. I'm the Chief of Staff for Family Values at Work, a child care and paid leave activist, and most importantly, a mom to my 10-year-old daughter, Mia. Family Values at Work is a network of 27 state coalitions working to achieve paid sick and safe days and family and medical leave insurance and other policies that value families at work. Our states have been paving the way for passage of a national paid leave policy that values this nation's dependence on caregivers and families. Watching my own daughter and thinking about the millions of children nationwide whose lives have been upended by this crisis underscores for me that the need to make our voices heard is now. We must ensure that our children are focused not just through the election, but consistently. We need to rebuild our child care infrastructure to ensure the safety and security of children and to pass a robust paid family leave policy. We are in uncharted territory. Our children's mental health and physical health are being impacted by this unprecedented time. Just as families worry, our children worry about not knowing when they'll go back to school, not knowing when they'll go out to play again. Some families have the additional stress of not knowing whether they'll be able to return to work or put food on the table due to the lack of these national paid leave policies. We know that 4.5 million childcare slots are at risk of disappearing, and up to 106 million workers have been left without any guaranteed paid leave to deal with this virus, making the ability to survive even worse. My daughter and so many others have benefited from the amazing and loving childcare providers, but sometimes kids need a parent's care when we first welcome them into our lives, when they're sick and when they're injured. And sometimes we ourselves need time to heal or care for a parent or other loved one. That means passing a comprehensive national paid leave program now to give greater economic security to families as we work to make it through this pandemic and beyond. This plan must have 3 priorities. The plan must be universal, covering all workers, no matter where they are, where they live, where they work, or who they love. This plan must also be affordable, with those who earn the least getting all or most of their wages. And it must be inclusive, so we can all care for our loved ones, however we define our families. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare an undeniable truth. What many considered the normal economy wasn't working for most people. The appalling blow to communities of color and disregard for essential workers reflect policies and practices that have existed since our nation's founding. It has laid bare the systemic racist policies that hold our countries back from everyone being able to prosper. As state and federal leaders decide the right way to reopen the economy, Family Values at Work calls on those leaders to instead open the door to a new economy, founded on an infrastructure of caring, equity, and respect. Today, you will hear from my colleagues who will share many ways this government must support families. And I urge all of you listening today to ensure your voices are heard, to ensure that children are centered in this election and beyond. I now have the honor to present worker advocate Jerry Sandoval, who will join us to talk about how the passage of a state leave program affected him and his family, and why the time is now for our government to pass a paid leave policy that is universal, affordable, and inclusive of all families. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jerry Sandoval, and I am a leader in the San Diego chapter of Parent Voices California, as well as the California Working Family Coalition. 6 years ago, when my daughter was born, I understood the mothers had the right for maternity leave. As a male parent, I didn't know I had the same right. It wasn't until somebody informed me of that such right. When I took paid family leave, it meant the world to me, spending time with my newborn daughter, encountering her new smiles, and as well as helping around the house, how my daughter returned to my life. I had 2 awesome but yet short weeks. Because of financial reasons, I had to return back to work sooner than expected. I worked for the security department of a privately owned hotel, and like many other people, I live paycheck to paycheck. It was very hard, only receiving 60 to 70% of the pay. That is the main reason I returned back to work. My daughter had to be 3 years old to qualify for childcare. It was then that I got involved with Parent Voices and began advocating for childcare. At the same time, I got involved with California Working Family Coalition and began advocating for paid family leave. I believe it is very important and essential that we have job protection when we take family leave. Our job status should not change when we return from paid family leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your story, Jerry. Thank you for sharing your story, Jerry. It's important to hear from those who have been most impacted and our grassroots organizers on the ground. Now we have the outstanding opportunity to hear from a special guest, Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. Senator Smith has been a champion for children and has helped lead the fight for paid leave and childcare. Senator Smith, welcome. We would like you to respond to our question, which is, what will your party's candidate, and you yourself do to ensure that issues that affect children are at the center of this year's presidential campaign? And if elected, ensure that the issues of children's health, childcare, paid leave, and ending child poverty are addressed.
Hi, I'm Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota, and I'm so glad to be a part of this forum today. So thank you to Every Child Matters for bringing us all together virtually to discuss important issues around childcare and early childhood education, children's health, and families' economic security. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about the importance of childcare, because I start from the fundamental value that childcare providers play a central role in making sure children and our communities and the economy thrive. It's true that for families with working parents, which as we know are most families, finding safe, accessible, loving childcare is a big deal. Without it, nothing else works. Childcare providers are vital to the lives of parents and children, but families are struggling. This pandemic is like an earthquake, shaking the foundations of our health and wellness and economic stability. But we are all in this together. But COVID is not the great equalizer. It is laying bare the inequities and injustice that persist in our society. So as I think about how we can work to be more inclusive and to build back better and stronger, I think about how families are going to need affordable and safe places for their children to get care when parents return to work. We need to make sure that childcare is still there, but we also need to acknowledge that families were struggling to afford childcare long before COVID. In my home state of Minnesota, and in more than half of states across the country, the cost of a year of childcare is more than a year of in-state college tuition. And on top of that, 2/3 of Minnesota's zip codes are what we call childcare deserts, which means that there are 3 children for every open childcare spot. This terrible COVID pandemic is threatening the very existence of many childcare centers and family childcare providers. And that's why in the Senate, I've teamed up with my colleague, Senator Elizabeth Warren, to get these providers the funding that they need in the next coronavirus relief package. We want them to be able to keep paying their staff and to avoid shutting their doors for good. It's so important for us to strengthen our childcare system for the future. So our bill, the Child Care is Essential Act, was already passed in the U.S. House of Representatives. And it's long past time for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to bring Republicans and Democrats together so the Senate can pass meaningful legislation to help the American people. I don't think that Americans wake up every day and think, I'm a Democrat and I'm taking my child off to daycare, or I'm a Republican and I need to get to work and make sure my kids are okay. We all need all of our leaders to understand that wanting your family to be safe, healthy, and cared for is a bipartisan issue. You already understand this, and the work that you do is so important. You know that when we invest in children, we invest in the future of our country. So thanks to all of you, the families and advocates and everyone watching and taking part in this event, for your continued dedication to making children a priority. You can count on me to be your partner in Washington, and please keep up the great work.
Thank you, Senator Smith. I'd now like to introduce Emily Gardner, the Communications Director for the Children's Defense Fund.
Thank you, Myra. The Children's Defense Fund has worked for nearly 50 years to hold our country accountable to meet all the needs of all children, from ending child poverty to safeguarding children's health to meeting the unique needs of children in the child welfare system and more. These are issues that have only become more urgent in recent months in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have a lot that we could share today, but we would rather have you hear directly from one of the young people that we're fighting for. Freyshawn Collins is one of CDF's incredible Beat the Odds Awards recipients. He is an activist in his community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he is a first-time voter. We asked Freyshawn to share his own inspiring story and his perspective on the change that he wants to see in this country, to serve as a reminder to all of us of all the young lives that are truly at stake in this election. So with that, I will turn it over to Freyshawn.
Hello, my name is Freyshawn Collins. I am an activist and a first-time voter and a representative of the Children's Defense Fund, Beat the Odds Award. I am speaking with you today because I want to share my story. My story is unique, but there are thousands of young people across the world with stories like mine, and whose futures are at stake with this election. Motivational speaker and preacher Dr. Eric Thomas states, pain is temporary. It may last for a minute or an hour or a day or even a year, but eventually it will subside and something else will take its place. If I quit, however, it will last forever. I am very grateful to my support system who never allowed me to feel pain for too long. My story begins like this. I grew up with 4 siblings and 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters. Since I was a kid, I can remember when I was 5 years old and it was the day before Easter. My mother was shot and killed on her way to the store to get me and my brothers some Easter outfits. I can just remember when my dad walked in the house hugging me very tight, with tears coming down his eyes saying he loved me very much and he's sorry. It wasn't his fault. He's a good man, so of course he'll take the blame. My grandma took me and my sibling in a few weeks after my mother's death. I stayed with my grandmother for 13 years after my birthday. My grandma got cancer. She was a good woman to her and to all the people. We all knew she didn't deserve what got into her, but God works in mysterious ways. When my grandmother passed, of cancer on November 14, 11 days after my 18th birthday. I couldn't believe it. I finally knew I had to grow up as a man and take control of things. So I took the place of the head household of my grandma where she was living in. I started paying bills and making sure it was food on the table and clothes on my back. I had very good help by my support system from my family as well. The maturity came out of me very quickly as I knew I had to grow up. I started doing better in school even though I was doing a fantastic job already. I started winning awards such as the Beat the Odds Award and the Children's Defense Fund and honor rolls and award from basketball. Life started to look bright, even though there were some sad stories as well. God definitely started opening more doors for me, and I appreciate it, and I took full advantage of it. This brings me all back to the election. As a first-time voter and someone who had beaten the odds already, I am interested in the following issues. Supporting a candidate who focuses on stopping gun violence in my community. Supporting a candidate who can reunite and bring people together. And supporting someone who will work on reforming the police. There are too many families in this country who don't have enough to eat or a place to live. Too many children who have to take the responsibility for making ends meet for their families, like I did. And too many neighborhoods where gun violence is taking the lives of innocent people like my mother. I'm voting in this election because their families matter and they deserve change. Thank you.
Thank you, Freyshawn, for your inspired words. You are truly a leader that we need. Next, we'll hear from Senior Analyst for the National Association for the Education of Young Children, Lucy Rosillo.
Thanks so much, Myra. Across America, individuals are suffering the devastating blow of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for those who are part of families with young children, or who have committed their lives to working with babies, infants, and toddlers, this period comes with a particularly painful reality. The coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated, across all states and settings, the challenges programs were already facing prior to the pandemic, and the child care sector is now on the brink of collapse. Through my role at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, the professional membership organization for the early childhood field, working to promote high-quality early learning for all young children birth through age 8, I have heard countless stories from child care providers and early childhood educators, similar to the one you will hear from my colleague Tracy Weston in just a few minutes, about the need to have elected officials who understand the importance of early childhood education. But it is not enough to simply understand the importance of high-quality early learning. Our country needs candidates and elected officials who can commit to funding childcare as the public good that it is, so that we have an early learning system that expands opportunities for young children and their families, that expands access to affordable, high-quality childcare where excellence and equity is advanced, and that values early childhood educators as the skilled professionals that they are. The reality is that while newspapers and media outlets from across the country have elevated the issues raised by organizations like ours and our more than 60,000 members and 50 affiliates to sound the alarm about the crisis at hand, current elected officials have fallen painfully short in providing this $99 billion industry the substantial, targeted federal and state investments needed to stabilize and support child care. Results from a survey we released in July, coupled with results from similar studies from our partners, paints an alarming picture. 40% of child care programs are certain they will close permanently without public assistance. 70% of child care centers are paying more for staff, cleaning supplies, and personal protective equipment. More than 325,000 child care workers have lost their jobs since the pandemic hit. And as Sade mentioned, we are facing a loss of up to 4.5 million child care spaces nationwide as a result of the permanent closures caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, more than ever, we need candidates who support a comprehensive investment in childcare that addresses the reality programs are confronting today and what is needed to move beyond this crisis and into a better future for parents, educators, and businesses alike. I'd now like to kick it over to my colleague and co-founder of Noah's Ark Preschool Academy of Terrell Incorporated, Tracy L. Weston.
Hello everyone, my name is Tracy L. Weston and I am the proud co-founder of Noah's Ark Preschool Academy of Terrell Incorporated, a child care program serving the rural community of Terrell County in Dawson, Georgia. Since September of 2015, Noah's Ark has been providing quality care for 35 infants and toddlers from 6 weeks to 4 years old in a county that has an estimated population of 8,500 people. Most of the families of the children I have in my care have limited options of employment and work primarily in fast food restaurants or in local stores, making on average less than $10,000 a year. When I co-founded Noah's Ark, I did not want access to quality child care to be an additional challenge to these families who needed child care in order to work and feed their families. Yet because of the devastating blow of the COVID-19 pandemic, I am fearful that my program will soon be gone, and with it our role as the leading child care center in the community. You see, prior to the pandemic, we had expanded our services at Noah's Ark to meet our families' needs and were providing care to an additional 27 children through an after-school and summer camp program. We were also planning to grow our capacity in order to meet the needs of families who were on our waiting list, but the pandemic has stopped that in its tracks. One of the biggest problems is that Noah's Ark, like so many child care and early learning programs across the country, we were already struggling because before the pandemic hit, we were all too familiar with scraping by to make ends meet, keeping our programs afloat on a shoestring budget, while experiencing all the challenges that are associated with being part of an underpaid and undervalued workforce. Still, despite all this, we remained hopeful for the future of our program. We held on to this hope when we reopened in June after months of being closed. We anchored ourselves in hope for brighter days while we adjusted to a new normal filled with stricter cleaning and sanitation guidelines and greater expenses as we worked to meet them so that parents who needed safe and quality care could have access to it while they went to work. We anchored ourselves in hope even as we heard from families who were too scared to send their children to the child care and were opting instead to keep children home, despite how difficult that choice was for them. We kept and continued holding on to hope. Yet the truth is that not even hope can save us from the reality that we are on the edge of closing our program forever. We teach our children that no one is an island, that it is our responsibility to give back, and today I come before you asking that you too recognize this reality. Child care providers cannot continue to be alone in this fight. We need candidates and elected officials at all levels, to prioritize child care, to support continued public funding, to keep programs like ours open, and to help us survive this pandemic in order to thrive well beyond it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy and Tracy. I hope every candidate heard your voice just now, Tracy. What powerful words, and we stand with you. Now I would like to hand it over to my dear colleague, Bruce Leslie, the president of First Focus.
We are living in a moment where it is clear that the future will look quite different than the one we imagined. We're experiencing a public health pandemic, an economic recession, and the desperate need to bring our country together to combat vast inequity and systemic discrimination. Every aspect of the lives of children are being negatively impacted by the pandemic and the economic recession. Their voices, concerns, anxiety, hope, and dreams should be listened to, fully considered, and most of all, addressed by our nation's leaders. Instead, children are an afterthought, and far too often our nation's leaders dismiss their needs under the false belief that children are somehow immune. They're not. The children are not all right. My colleagues have discussed an array of issues that must be addressed for children. With respect to their health care, even before the pandemic and the recession, the number of uninsured children was rising for the first time in 2 decades. In 2018 alone, the percentage of uninsured children increased by 10%. Unfortunately, that problem has grown as a new report shows that families with children have disproportionately lost their jobs and health coverage in this pandemic and recession. Meanwhile, the American Academy of Pediatrics reports that the number of coronavirus cases in children has risen 90% in just 4 weeks, that children have fallen well behind on their vaccinations, and that we are entering flu season in the near term. None of this is good news. While we all want our children to return to school, many of our political leaders are demanding that children go back to school without having done the necessary work to protect our children, their teachers, and their families from harm. By, first, controlling the virus, and second, giving schools the resources and assistance necessary to address the array of interlocking problems necessary to protect the health and safety of students, teachers, and their families. Those who will pay the eventual price of that failure are America's children for years to come. Our nation's leaders must work on ways to come out of the current crisis with the hope of a better America and a better world for the next generation. Our national and state leaders must pay attention to and focus on the needs of children and get it right. Our future depends on it. First, our nation's leaders need to plan to cover all kids. We must reverse the recent increase in the number of uninsured children and ensure that all children have health insurance coverage. Second, our nation's leaders must recognize that children are not little adults and they have unique healthcare needs. When it comes to this pandemic, we must address the fact that children's infection rates are rising, their immunization rates are declining, and that they have increased mental health care needs through this crisis. Third, our nation's leaders must address the needs of special populations, such as children in juvenile justice, foster care, homeless children, and children seeking asylum along the border who are being placed in cages and being placed at grave risk. Children also need a coordinated and comprehensive approach to addressing the challenges impacting every aspect of the lives of children and families. They need what children have in 60 countries across the world have, an independent children's commissioner. As President John F. Kennedy said, children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future.
Thank you for such an important perspective, Bruce Leslie of First Focus on Children. First Focus is such an important partner in our kids' advocacy movement. Now we have the outstanding opportunity to hear from an esteemed guest, Representative Karen Bass of Los Angeles, California. Representative Bass is currently the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and was considered a potential vice presidential candidate. Welcome, Representative Bass. Our question for you today is, what will your party, your party's candidate, and you yourself do to ensure that the issues that affect children are central to this year's presidential campaign? And if elected, to ensure that the issues of children's health, child care, paid leave, and ending child poverty are addressed.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Karen Bass from Los Angeles, California, and I am very excited that our ticket, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, is going to be able to put our country back on track. 3.5 years of this administration has been devastating to our country in so many ways. The plight of children have absolutely been ignored and need to be front and center from a variety of different angles. First and foremost is the health and the safety of our children. The idea that children are immune from the COVID virus has certainly been disproven. And so we need to make sure that our children are safe and that they are healthy. We are going to need to address education in a major way. The achievement gap that was already there is definitely going to be widened throughout this pandemic because we know that not all children have equal access to online learning. So we will need to deal with that, and I know that it will be front and center of our campaign. And thinking of children who are vulnerable, like children in the foster care system, children with special needs, children who have been ignored for the last 3.5 years will be front and center of our agenda as we move forward. As a member of Congress, when I first was elected 10 years ago, I started the bipartisan Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth, and we have been focusing on the plight of foster youth and what is happening with them through this pandemic. So this is an issue that I have worked on for decades. I will continue to work on it. And I know that this is an issue that is front and center to Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, soon to be, in a few months, President and Vice President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Bass. And now on to our final panelist, Executive Director of First 5 Years Fund and a dear colleague as well, Sarah Rittling.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Myra, for that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here with everyone today. My goal is to leave you with hope and optimism for what we can achieve together. Like everything these days, I start with the current pandemic and what it's surfacing with respect to childcare in particular, which is quite simply that childcare is foundational. It is essential, whether it's the high quality experience that sets a child on the path to success or the very basis from which any economic recovery must rest. We are all living our personal stories right now, whether you have children of your own, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, friends, colleagues, or you read any newspaper on any given day about the role childcare is playing. There quite frankly isn't one of us who isn't witnessing firsthand the essential nature of childcare. While we can hopefully all agree that it's essential, what we knew before the pandemic has now only been exacerbated. Providers operate on razor-thin margins. Parents need choices, and there often are not enough quality choices available for them. Quality matters, and it is expensive. So expensive, in fact, as you've heard, it towers over that of college tuition, which parents have years to save for. Consider these statistics. 67% of children under the age of 6 in the United States have all available parents in the labor force. Approximately 60% of children under age 5 participated in regular weekly care arrangements prior to COVID-19. 72% of women with children participated in the labor force in 2019, and female participation resulted in an addition of approximately $1.7 trillion in economic activity since 1979. Go women. Thanks to the work of brain scientists and economics, we know that high quality is linked to better educational outcomes for children who grow up to power the U.S. economy. Before COVID, childcare challenges cost the U.S. economy $57 billion in lost earnings, productivity, and revenue annually. While most parents know their children in K-12 will have a school to eventually return to, the same cannot be said for parents with children aged birth through 5. A recent bipartisan policy center survey showed 2/3 of parents who still need childcare are having difficulty finding it. Further, about half of parents are concerned their provider would no longer be open when they are able to return to work. Nearly 50% of parents are concerned they won't be able to afford childcare when they can return. And businesses feel this too. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation recently found that 40% of employers are concerned that some employees will not fully return to work. Employers believe this is mainly due to both health and safety concerns. So now what? We tackle the issues prevalent before COVID that were amplified by this pandemic: affordability, access to quality. We use our shared experiences over the past several months as momentum And mostly we build on the years of bipartisan support for early childhood education and care that is evidenced in state capitals, governor suites, and the halls of Congress. This is an issue of opportunity. This is an issue that will truly make a difference in lives today and build a better tomorrow. Thank you for having me.
Go women indeed. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all our speakers that joined us for our virtual forum. And to all our viewers today, thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the remainder of the Democratic National Convention. Thank you.